What is up, y'all? Philly Fly Show checking in here, kicking it at Railway Production Studios, and we back for another week of UFC fights. It's kind of crappy that they're on back in the morning for back-to-back weeks, but hey, that's what we get with some of these international fights. The prelims will start at 9 a.m. for you, and the main card kicks off at about 11. So we got 14 legs here, /matchup, 14 different fights. We're going to jump right into it because it's been over 2 weeks since the Philly Fly Show's had a show, so we're not going to do a review. We only do reviews for back-to-back weeks, and I usually just do a quick 2-minute review on everything just to get you on how the picks are going, but the picks have been solid. High percentage this year. High. I mean, just ridiculously high. So if you haven't been watching the show, you haven't been cashing your checks at all. So we'll get into a match like 14 here. One thing, if you see me going a little slow on here, I wrote down all the match legs one day, and then the next day I go back to it and I write down the odds. When I went and did that, they mixed up the order of the fights and switched around fights, and it's so annoying that my sheet is just like do. So I got to keep up with it. I might be looking down on my sheet a little bit more this week, but we're gonna get a quick one in here, and I'm not gonna go too much detail because there's a lot of people making their UFC debuts and a lot of prospects trying to get their name back in the pool to get good record here. So match like number 14 is a strawweight bout between Mariana Spasic and Stephanie Lusano. Stephanie is a -350 favorite, whereas Mariana is a +265 underdog. Mariana is making her UFC debut. She is a 7-1 fighter and 4-1 in her last 5, so she's got a good record coming in. Stephanie Lusano, she's 3-1-1 in her last 5, 2-1 in the UFC, and coming off a submission win. She's got more MMA fights and more UFC experience than this girl. Making her debut against her is going to be very, very tough. And if I remember correctly, Luciano is a savage. So I'm not going to sit here and doubt her. I'm going to go with Luciano here. 3 out of 5 on the confidence level. She can get her hand raised. Match like number 13 is a heavyweight bout between Jovan Leka and Alexander Popek. Now, Popek's a +180 underdog, whereas Leka is a -225 favorite. Leka is making his UFC debut. He's 5-0 in his last 5, and he's a 13-2 record behind his name. His counterpart is making his UFC debut as well. He's 4-0-1 in his last 5 and got a 21-5 record here. Look, man, the heavyweights are gonna throw, and it's a hard one to pick. I almost flipped a coin here. I went with Leka, but looking at the record for Popek is a more experienced fighter. He's got 26 professional fights compared to Leka's 15. But when the odds maker have it at 2-1, that means Leka probably has some dynamite in his hands, or he's a very, very good wrestler. I didn't get a good background on both these guys when I looked them up. You get small bits and pieces here of KOs and stuff, but you got to super search on some of these. And I wasn't going down that rabbit hole with Leka. I watched his last fight, was impressed. Watch Popek's not their whole last fight, their last highlights in their league. And that's how I base this one off. So not very confident in this 1 out of 5 on the confidence level. Leka gets his hand raised after this fight. Now, this is where I got to go down the sheet and get the match like number 12 here. It is a women's bantamweight fight between Nina Misalevic and Haley Crowell. Crowell is a +390 underdog, whereas Nina is a -550 favorite. Now, Nina is 5-0 in her last 5, 8-1 making her UFC debut with a 8-1 record, I should say. Fighting a girl who has some UFC experience. She's 2-3 in her last 5, 0-3 in the UFC, and on a 3-fight lose streak. She just can't seem to put it together. She kind of seems like one of these gatekeeping, not like she's not talented, but she's not talented enough to take on the elite of the elite in the UFC. And Nina, I just feel like even though she's making her UFC debut and doesn't have as much experience as Crowell, she's still going to get the win there and get a massive win. Pick Nina to get her hand raised after that fight. 3 out of 5 on the confidence level that she can get her hand raised. Now, we got to find matching number 11 here. It is a lightweight bout between Matus Rebekci and Kyle Proplek. Kyle's a plus 440 underdog, whereas Rebeshi is a negative 650 favorite. Rebeshi can hang with the best of them, even though his record doesn't seem that great. Rebeshi's 1-4 in his last 5, 4-4 in the UFC. He's on a 3-fight lose streak, but against killers, and he's a really short and stocky guy. So even if he, let's just say, had to move up to welterweight, he'd be way too small, and he's kind of small at the lightweight division for it. So that's his downfall. Kyle Propek is long and lanky, and he looked game against BSD, but then Drew Dober put his lights out and that's why Propek's got a plus 440 underdog. You can risk some money on Propek, but I would not recommend it, because I just think Rebeshi's is that much better. But Rebeshi's got to put it together, because if Propek uses his distance and gets the striking off, it's going to be a bad night for him. If he can get inside right away and land something and get respect right out of Propek right away, it's going to be a bad night for Propek. So it's a hard one to pick, even though the odds makers have Rebeshi at negative 650. Propek, though, is, where am I here? 3-2 in his last 5, 0-2 in the UFC, and he has 2-fight lose streak. Comes to BSD, Benoit Saint Denis, and Drew Dober. So it's no slouches, but at the same time, highly touted, coming out, and he looked really good against BSD. So like I said, if he can use his distance, he can win this fight, but he's gonna have to put it all together against a guy like Rebeshi. All right, matchup number 10 here is a featherweight bout between Denis Bazooka and Bogdan Grad. Now, Bogdan Grad is a negative 210 favorite, whereas Bazooka is a plus 168 underdog. Bazooka's 1-4 in his last 5, 1-4 in the UFC, and on a 2-fight lose streak. His counterpart in Bogdan's 3-2 in his last 5, 1-2 in the UFC, and coming on a 2-fight lose streak. So somebody's lose streak's got to end, but who's it going to be? Now, I really like both these guys, but Bogdan, just his gas tank is his issue, whereas Bazooka, he just hasn't put it all together, and his gas tank is not his issue. So I'm going with Bazooka here. I think he's going to get a nice win. I keep calling him Bazooka. It's kind of funny. It's like Bahuka. I have a hard time saying his name. Denis Bazooka, plus 168. Cash it to the bank, baby. All right, matchup number 9 here. Got to go up the sheet now, even though I have it right here in the correct order. It's a bantamweight fight between a Borislav Nikolic versus Mark Volgday. Now, Mark is a plus 154 underdog, whereas Borislav is a negative 192 favorite. Look, man, Borislav has a MMA professional record of 2-1, making his UFC debut, going against a guy named Mark, who is 3-1-1 in his last 5, 0-1 in the UFC. He came to a draw with the last guy he fought. Man, that's a crazy. He might have had a lot of amateur fights and might be highly tolerant, Borislav, but to only have 3 professional fights and to get in the UFC, yeah, that's going to be tough against a guy who definitely has more fights than that. Just on record in his UFC in his last 5 has more fights in him. So we're going to go with Mark. I think Mark's going to be too much for a guy having only 3 fights. Don't care how highly touted he is. He's got to get past Mark and show that he can get a big win there. 3 out of 5 on a confidence level, and Mark gets his hand raised after this fight. Now we got to find matchup number 8 here. This is a good fight because I want to see if my guy Oban Elliott / the Welsh Gangster can make a comeback here. It's a welterweight fight. Like I said, Oban Elliott versus Michael Oliveira. Oliveira's a negative 355 favorite versus Oban Elliott, and it's plus 270. I have been wrong on Oban's last couple fights, but man, that dude's got it. He's just got to put it together. Oliveira is making his UFC debut, and that's a tough debut to make. Oban is 3-2 in his last 5, 3-2 in the UFC, but on a 2-fight lose streak here, coming against a guy who is making his UFC debut and is a 9-0 fighter, hasn't tasted defeat, but hasn't fought a guy with this type of fighting degree in Oban Elliott. He is a badass. He'll beat you down, and it's going to be a whole MMA fight. It isn't just all stand-up striking. He mixes it together. So Michael's going to have to put it on him and actually wrestle, grapple, strike. He's going to have to do it all because Oban's just going to be going at him like crazy, and I think Oban gets a big win on Saturday. Cash that to the bank, but 1 out of 5 on the confidence level just because he has come up short in his last 2 fights and not look that good. So, all right, now we get to match number 7 here. We only have one mismatch after this where I actually have to pay attention and not screw this up, but we get a badass fight here in a lightweight bout between Ludovic Klein and Tofi Masayev. Now, Masayev is a plus 186 underdog, whereas Ludovic Klein's a negative 235 favorite. Obviously, you can probably tell who I'm going with. I'm going with my boy here. Ludovic Klein's 4-1 in his last 5, 8-3-1 in the UFC, coming off a big win against Rubzeki after his first loss. Hit his first loss in a while in the UFC a couple fights ago, and when he put this on Rebeshi, it was a clinic, man. But I'm pretty sure Ludovic Klein also broke his ankle or did something. I don't know if it was his ankle, but the fight before where he lost, I'm pretty sure he broke something in somewhere in his leg and still finished the fight somehow. So that we're gonna have a good banger on Saturday. And then Tofi gets 3-2 in his last 5, 1-1 in the UFC, coming off a decision win against his last opponent. Ludovic Klein's boxing is going to be way too much for him. Unless Masayev gets him to the ground and grapples him, it's not going to be a pretty fight because Ludovic Klein can use that distance. He can use those hands. And then he has these slight kicks that people underestimate. So it's going to be a very hard fight for Tofi. I'm picking Ludovic Klein to get a big win on Saturday, 3 out of 5 on a confidence level. He can get his hand raised. Slide up to match number 6. It's a lightweight bout between 2 guys that are making their UFC debut in Milos Yannick and Noah Gagnon. Now, Noah's a negative 115 slight edge pick'em favorite. Yannick is a negative 105 slight pick'em underdog. Don't really care about either of those records. Both guys making their UFC debut is kind of hard to pick between dudes. The Yannick is 5-0 in his last 5 and got a 19-3 record. His counterpart is 5-0 in his last 5 and got a 9-2 record. So I'm going to go with the guy with the more professional fighting experience in Yannick. I just think he'll outmanage him and outsmart him. So it's the right pick to do because don't know much about these guys and it's a little risky. 1 out of 5 on the confidence level. He can get his hand raised. Get into matchup number 5 here where I can just go down the list now and be good with it. But we still got more UFC debuts on here. Vasto Seppo versus Gilbert Urbina. Urbina's a plus 285 underdog, whereas Vlasto is a negative 375 favorite. Vlasto is making his UFC debut. He's 4-1 in his last 5, 14-3 record as an MMA pro. And Gilbert Urbina is 1-4 in his last 5, 1-3 in the UFC, and on a 2-fight lose streak. So Gilbert is a roller coaster, and he was kind of highly touted coming in against the guys that he got put up against. Now with that, Seppo being a 3-1 favorite, you're going to have to respect the odds makers on this one. Even though Urbina's fought some good opponents, I think Seppo's going to go in there and beat him down. He's just, even his MMA record is longer than Urbina's. Urbina's just got some UFC experience, so just going to go Seppo here, 3 out of 5 on a confidence level because I just don't trust Urbina's skill set to win. All right, match number 4 is a middleweight bout between Dusko Trodovic and Robert Valentin. Robert's a negative 170 favorite, where Dusko's a plus 138 underdog. They're not giving my boy Dusko any respect on here with that odds making. I know Valentin can grapple, but Trodovic is well-rounded and hard to knock out. So I'm liking Trodovic here, obviously. 2-3 in his last 5 for Trodovic, 4-6 in the UFC, coming off a submission win. His counterpart's 2-3 in his last 5, 1-3 in the UFC, but coming off his first win with a submission in his last fight. It's going to be a tough fight for Valentin. Trodovic's going to put it on him and beat him down. 1 out of 5 on the confidence level. He can get his hand raised. All right, flip this page here. Heavyweight bout between Alexander Rashik and Marcin Tybura. We get to see Rashik finally make his UFC debut at heavyweight. He's been a great light heavyweight fighter for years, but just recently he just can't put it together, and he says the weight cut's what's getting to him. So maybe seeing him at heavyweight's going to be the difference maker. Rashik's a negative 355 favorite. Marcin Tybura plus 270 underdog. Rashik is 1-4 in his last 5, 6-5 in the UFC, and on a 4-fight lose streak, unfortunately. Marcin Tybura 2-3 in his last 5, 14-10 in the UFC, and on a 2-fight lose streak himself. Some of these lose streaks got to go, but hey, Marcin is going to be I honestly think should be the favorite because he's been a heavyweight before. I know the odds makers are just giving Rashik because of what he's done in the past, but Marcin can put it together. He can grapple, he can strike, and he's got an okay gas tank. Rashik seems like he's got glass jaw syndrome as of late, so it's going to be a hard fight for him. But I'm picking Rashik just because every time I pick Tybura to win, he loses. Every time I pick against him, he wins. So I'm just going to keep it going. We're going with Rashik here. But if you're smart, you wouldn't risk this on a parlay. Just don't risk Rashik on a parlay for you. 1 out of 5 on the conference level. He gets his hand raised. Co-main event of the evening is unfortunately on the back of this sheet because my sheet wasn't big enough. It's a badass light heavyweight fight. Number 13, Jan Blachowicz versus number 10, Navarro Sterling. Now, Navajo Sterling is a 350 favorite. Jan Blachowicz plus 265 underdog. Look, Jan's just getting up there in age, and Sterling's got that young competitor heart. He's undefeated. It's hard to pick against him. Jan's 1-2-2 in his last 5, 12-8-2 in the UFC, and coming off a draw against Guskov, who just lost to Ankalaev in a bad way. And then you got now you got Sterling 5-0 in his last 5, 5-0 in the UFC, and a 10-0 undefeated fighter. Hasn't tasted any defeat, and he's even faced adversity and pulled it together. So I'm going Navarro Sterling. Big win. I honestly think if you want to get better odds, you want to sweeten those odds on there, Navarro Sterling on a finish there against Jan Blachowicz. 3 out of 5 on the conference level. He gets hand raised. We get to the main event of the evening, boys and girls, cats and dogs. We're ready for it. Welterweight bout between number 14, Uros Medic, and number 13, Daniel Rodriguez. Rodriguez a plus 300 underdog. Uros negative 400 favorite. Uros Medic is 4-1 in his last 5, 7-3 in the UFC, and on a 3-fight win streak. Daniel Rodriguez, he is 3-2 in his last 5, 10-4 in the UFC, and on a 3-fight win streak. Look, man, Daniel can fight, and he's a dog, man. He ain't gonna back down from nobody. But Medic is a different animal with those hands. It's crazy his knockdown rate for his efficiency. And when he took his first fight back and he lost, it's all right. Things happen like that, and he just took a bad L there. It happens. But Daniil's also coming out of jail. Like, literally a couple months ago was in jail. Yeah, he might have been training now for a couple months, and even in jail, he could have been, still putting in work. But when you're putting in jail time in Mexico country jail, yeah, that's pretty some badass shit. And I don't know if that's going to be good or bad for him. So I'm going to go with the guy who's got lightning in the hands and can put your lights out at any point. I'm going Uros Medic to get a big win on Saturday. 3 out of 5 on the conference level. He gets his hand raised. Y'all, this was a quick one for you this week. Got it under 20 minutes like I'm trying to do as of late. But hey, sometimes these cards need a little bit more chit-chat so you get a little more info to put your money on. See y'all next week for a good show, because now back with a mic, and I can't break this mic like the last one because it comes in a box. Peace out, y'all.